Power clips a Target store and crashes into a Costco parking lot. And tonight, CBS News 8 has uncovered her last contact with the control tower.
I'm full throttle.
So Mike Papa, turn back to the field if you're able.
I'm going down.
One person was killed, and right now, the investigation is underway.
In a matter of days recently, we were seemingly swamped with news reports of small plane crashes. From almost every corner of America, smaller private planes were experiencing failures and costing the lives of those who likely never thought about their safety. Secure in the knowledge the planes, the pilots, all safe and prepared for anything. That may not necessarily be the case, however. Let's welcome into MidPoint former chief spokesman for the U.S. airline industry, David Fuscus, joins us today. David, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be with you.
David, let's break this down into a couple of things. First of all, large aircraft, the commercial airliners. Is it still not fair to say, and I checked this, that we haven't had a crash in the continental United States of a commercial airliner since 2009. So if you are to look at American air carriers and here in the continental U.S., are we still not perhaps the safest, if not the safest in the world?
Commercial air travel in the U.S. is incredibly safe. As a matter of fact, if you look at it statistically, you can fly every day for 124,000 years before you're statistically would be involved in a fatal air crash. But there's a difference between commercial air travel and general aviation, which is the rash of small plane crashes that we've been seeing lately.
Let's talk about that general aviation then, because I have a lot of friends who are small pilots, small aircraft pilots, and they tell me the same thing. Most of the time it is people who are ill-trained, who don't know the equipment that they're on, or who are taking chances that they shouldn't. Is that fair to say? Put those three together?
Well, yeah, there's a number of things that go into commercial aviation. Generally, overall, commercial aviation is very safe. But you do sometimes get people who try to fly aircraft that are too much for them, that they're not experienced enough with. They make mistakes, and we have accidents. It's a world of difference between commercial air travel and general aviation.
Are we doing enough then to make sure that the people who are flying the smaller planes in general aviation are well trained, that the planes are well kept, and that they are safe at all times, or does there need to be more done?
Well, first of all, that every commercial airline pilot or every general aviation pilot in the U.S. has to have a license from the FAA. There's also the Airline Operators and Pilots Association, which is a group of pilots which does very good work in safety overall. But the biggest thing that we can do is that general aviation, if they are pilots, is educate them. If they aren't experienced in flying in bad weather, then make sure that they're not flying out in bad weather. Weather is a key factor in many of these accidents.
I want to bring up what has happened overseas, certainly, because what has happened to Malaysia Airlines twice and other aircraft from time to time overseas certainly is that sobering reminder for a lot of people as to what can happen in the air. These are international flights. These are not necessarily flights that originate here in America. Could we say with some sort of security here that sometimes those other airlines overseas are not quite as good in their pilot preparation, in their aircraft preparation, and in their maintenance?
But really the problem here is we've got a diffused system by which governments decide whether or not their national air carriers fly over areas of conflict. There's an international organization that issues guidance on this, but it's individual governments that make decisions. And the conventional wisdom has been for a long time that it's safe to fly over conflict zones for all airlines, U.S. or others, because you're flying high enough that you're out of the range of weapon systems that are normally controlled by states. You know, clearly this system needs review. It needs review on behalf of all the carriers around the world. The decision-making process by deciding about whether or not to fly over a conflict zone, it's just clearly after the Malaysian air disaster that it isn't working. It needs review.
In some cases, do the governments need to get out of the air traffic business?
Well, as someone who believes in free markets, I think that every airline is better when it's run by independent businesses. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. In many companies, countries, the only reason that they have air service in many countries in Africa, for example, is because the government is running or is supporting the national airline. And the other big thing is with a lot of countries, having a national air carrier, having air carriers that are based in your country is a type of national pride. People are proud of it. It's part of the way they look at themselves as citizens of that country. So I don't think we're ever going to get the governments out of the airline business. It should be in the business of regulating safety and making sure it's safe, but not in the business of running air carriers. That should be left to the market.
Is there a good enough job done then in making sure that the aircraft are safe?
In some places, yes, some places, no. The United States, Europe, for example, developed countries, the answer to that is yes. The regulatory authorities, the systems are incredibly safe. You go to somewhere to Africa, for example, that has substandard infrastructure, older planes, not as good maintenance, all of these things together make that the most dangerous region to fly in the world. So in places like Africa, a lot could be done to improve aviation safety. 5% of the world's air traffic occurs in Africa, and 25% of the world's accidents occur there. That just shows you there's something wrong.
David, I want to bring aircraft security, or safety, if you will, from the air, and I want to bring it back down to the ground here for a moment. This story caught my attention. San Jose, California, a 62-year-old stowaway arrested 6 times trying to sneak on flights at San Francisco International, managed to go to the Mineta San Jose International Airport, flew to Los Angeles without a ticket. And this is the second time at this airport that has happened in the last 4 months. This is the same airport where this young 15-year-old boy climbed a security fence, got into the wheel well of an aircraft, and managed to survive a ride all the way to Hawaii. Now, the airport says, wait a minute, these are 2 very separate incidents. Wait a minute here. We're still talking about airport security, aren't we, in one way, shape, form, or another? And I think this is what has Americans very unsettled, is that sometimes these airports are just not safe from simple incursions like somebody crossing a fence.
Well, if there's 2 incidents at one airport, I mean, that shows you right there that there's something wrong. It's a big indication that something is wrong. Security is made up of several layers. It's made up of intelligence. You're giving intelligence on passengers, physical security when you go through TSA, and then also the airlines have a role in this as well, in ensuring that the people that get on their aircraft are actually supposed to be on the aircraft. Generally, this system works very, very well, but there are anomalies. There are times when it just doesn't, and clearly this is the case.
With those anomalies, though, would you say that there are more of them that are potentially out there waiting to happen? Because that's certainly what the American traveler is afraid of.
I think that you're always, in a system as large as the U.S. aviation system, you're always going to have breaches of security on some level, even with the Transportation Security Administration doing everything that they do. It's of concern, but these happen on a very, very small level. So it's of concern, but I don't think it's the foremost aviation security issue that's out there.
In your opinion, then, when it comes to going to the airport, because you know this as well as I do, people are always going to complain, I want to take off my shoes. Come on, I have to go through one of these puffers that check out my body and check out my what I'm wearing and everything. People are just tired of this right now. But isn't it necessary in many ways? Because sometimes it's the low tech that gets in our way, not always the high tech that makes things unsafe.
Well, it's absolutely necessary. One of the reasons that we have the safest aviation system in the world is because we've got the things in place that keep it that way. So it is important that we have aviation security for individuals going on to aircraft, for cargo going on to aircraft. And most importantly, what happens a lot of times out of sight is all the work that's done to find explosives, to look for explosives, which is where the primary focus of the Transportation Security Administration should be.
Are they doing a good enough job, in your opinion?
Well, there's some problems with it. About 18 months ago, there was a proposal to let passengers take very small knives, very small pen knives onto aircraft, the type that people would use to clean their nails with, for example. And the reason for that was to allow the security apparatus to start focusing on the more important things, which are the explosives, things that can take down an aircraft. Well, the public didn't like that overall, that you could take these small knives on, but a small knife can't take down the aircraft. And I think that anything that we can do to improve the system, to increase the focus on explosives, that's going to make the system safer.
Do sometimes we have to tell the general public, you got to put up with this a little bit because you are completely unaware of what's going on behind the scenes, and because there are still people out there looking to find ways to bring these planes down?
I think there's constantly people looking for ways to bring planes down. There's no bigger trophy for a terrorist than to bring down a commercial aircraft. Security has continued to evolve and improve, and I think it will evolve and improve as we're going forward. If you remember back to the 1970s when it was hijackers that were with a threat to aircraft. People are hijacking planes and flying them to Cuba. That's when the first real security started, and it's continued to improve as we go along. But it is something that people have to put up with. Now, one thing that people don't have to put up with is bad service or rude service. And I've also noticed that getting better, that the attitude of the security agents has gotten better over the last few years.
Unfortunately, we're all out of time, but you opened again that can right there. We could go on for hours and talk about that and the people who complain about the service sometime. That's fair to say.
My mother's first among them.
and my dad right behind him. Trust me, it's the same thing. David, thank you so much for joining us, my friend. We'll do it again.
All right. Enjoy being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Later on this hour, a sobering reminder of how unsafe those little cars we love for gas mileage savings and more really are. It's all coming up on MidPoint.